I'm going to be honest, I hate bro science, and unfortunately, most of the diets that you have probably tried were built on research done on men. And that matters simply because a woman's body is going to respond to food and training completely differently depending on where she's at in her cycle and in life. The same meal can spike your insulin way harder on a Friday than on a Tuesday, or compared to your boyfriend. And no diet that you've ever followed has actually accounted for that. We are not just small men, and the way that we store fat and use it for fuel and respond to diet is all shaped by hormones that shift in a way that men's just simply don't. Nobody gave you the right framework for your body, and it took me years to create a plan which does. And if you want that plan, I offer it as part of my weight loss coaching. Link is in the description. But today, I want to talk about some of the differences between men and women when it comes to dieting. And I've got my laptop here with some notes so I can put up a nice slideshow on the screen. Let me know if you like this style, trying something a little bit different for how I film my videos. So, I want to just talk about a study which showed that men and women can eat the same calories, the same plan across 8 weeks, while men actually lost more. And this is documented, not just anecdotal. The reason isn't that the women tried less or ate more, it's that the male and female bodies handle fat storage and fuel selection really differently on that hormonal level. The mainstream diets world answer to this is basically just eat less. And that's the exact approach that tends to backfire hardest for women when there are really 4 specific things happening in a woman's body that change how fat loss works. And I'm going to go through all 4 in this video. So let's talk a little bit about hormones. So men have roughly 10 to 7 times as much testosterone than women do. That's not a small gap. That is massive, and it drives more muscle, faster resting metabolism, and where the body stores fat as well. With higher testosterone, men are going to be storing that fat viscerally. This is the fat that sits around the organs and creates that real firm, like people call it a beer belly, at least in Australia. And while that is actually more dangerous, it does burn off a bit faster when men diet, whereas women have got a lot more estrogen, which is going to be telling the body to store fat subcutaneously. So this is under the skin, and usually for women, it's going to sit around the hips, the thighs, the lower belly sort of area, rather than underneath the abs. Subcutaneous fat is actually the safer type metabolically. It's not the type that is wrapping around your organs. I did a whole video on visceral fat if you want to go watch that. But this subcutaneous fat is a bit more stubborn and responds a bit slower to restriction. So if you want to think of it this way, estrogen is storing this fat on purpose. It is storing it in those places because biologically, your body is preparing for the possibility of pregnancy. It is a protective function, not a malfunction of the body. So when a man and a woman eat the same calorie deficit, the man is often losing the faster responding, often visceral fat. And the woman's body is just trying to shift that more stubborn subcutaneous fat that the body is putting there for a protective reason. So it doesn't really want to get rid of it. And so, of course, the scale is going to move differently. The thing that actually moves subcutaneous fat is managing insulin, not just cutting calories. And calorie restriction alone often doesn't really unlock that fat for burning like lowering insulin does. This is why a big part of my metabolic method plan focuses on insulin management, not just a calorie deficit. Now I just want to talk a bit about muscles. So women naturally carry less skeletal muscle than men. This is usually around 30 to 35% for women and 40 to 45% for men. And muscle burns energy just by existing. The more muscle that you have means that your body is going to be burning more at rest, even before you've even moved. So men start with a higher metabolic baseline just by having more of it. And testosterone also helps men hold on to their muscle when they're in a calorie deficit. It is protective in that way. Women don't have as much of that same buffer. So when we restrict really hard, we can often lose muscle alongside that, which tends to slow our metabolism down even further. And this is a big part of why just eat less approach tends to sort of backfire for us. You do lose some weight at first, but if you're also losing a decent amount of muscle along with it, then your metabolism is going to adapt downward. And suddenly you are eating very little and barely losing anything. The answer here is things like protein and resistance training, and I mean properly, not just Pilates. I love Pilates, but it works on more endurance muscles, and we want to be building the kind of muscle that actually changes your metabolic rate, and that means you're going to be needing to lift heavy and heavy enough to really challenge you. So when you build more muscle, your body can handle more carbohydrates without storing them as fat because muscle absorbs glucose when you eat carbs. More muscle means more carb tolerance, more flexibility long term, and that is the goal. My body personally can handle a lot more carbs now than it used to be able to. Then I just want to talk about our menstrual cycle. So for women who are currently experiencing the menstrual cycle, and something that I wish that I had been told earlier is that the women's menstrual cycle has got two distinct halves: the follicular phase, which is roughly the first two to roughly the first 2 weeks leading up to ovulation, and then the luteal phase, which is 2 weeks after ovulation leading into your period. So these two phases are completely different metabolic environments. And one study measured insulin sensitivity across the cycle found that it was more than double in the follicular phase compared to in the luteal phase. More than double. That is crazy. So, in your follicular phase, we've got estrogen, which is rising. We've got higher insulin sensitivity, where your body is going to be handling carbohydrates pretty well. Blood sugar is more stable, cravings are quieter, energy is generally a bit better, and your window for slightly more carbs and longer fasting periods can be done in this phase, and some more intense training. Then we have got your luteal phase. So we want to pull back the carbs a bit here and lean into more fats and protein. Your body is going to naturally shift towards burning that fat as fuel rather than glucose. It also means that you're going to have slightly more blood sugar swings. Maybe your cravings are louder as well, and you can feel more like lying on the couch rather than sprinting, and that's completely normal. In my metabolic method, I always tell clients the luteal phase is not the time to be aggressive with fasting or restriction. A 12 to 14-hour overnight fasting window is plenty. Pull the carbs back a bit, lean into fats and protein, and be a bit gentler on yourself. Your follicular phase, though, that is when you can push harder. If you're not tracking your cycle, then maybe just start now and you can start to see how this kind of rhythm plays out during the month. And on a note, the specifics here can vary a lot based on your cycle length. If you have conditions like PMOS, which used to be called PCOS, endometriosis, or perimenopause, all of that is going to shift what this looks like individually for you. This is something that I always adapt for my clients because everybody is different and I can't do that through a YouTube video. So this is just general information. Then I want to talk about carbs. So both men and women produce insulin responses in a different way. So both men and women produce insulin in response to carbohydrates. That's the same. But the difference is that women are more sensitive to insulin's fat storage effects, particularly in those subcutaneous deposits that I was talking about that estrogen really manages. So the same refined carb like white bread, sugar, ultra processed snack foods, they tend to produce a stronger fat storage response in women. And that's not a reason to never eat carbs. It is a reason to be smarter about which ones and when. And in my approach, I go for more whole foods carbs, and once it digests slowly and produce a gentle insulin response rather than their processed equivalents. And the goal is always to swap the type, not eliminate the category. Pairing matters too, like what I put up on the screen. We're going to have a different response to a carb alone versus a carb that's paired with a protein and a fat. And then other things like carb timing. We want to be eating these when your body handles them the best. During your luteal phase, this becomes even more relevant. Your insulin sensitivity can already be lower, so the same meal could cause a bigger response than it would in your follicular phase. Except in your late luteal phase, which is just a few days out from your period, cravings will increase slightly. So, increasing your natural carbs here for energy can help you manage those cravings. There's always still caveats here and there. And this is the type of thing that I wish I'd learned sooner, and I wish that someone had even told people like my mum this sooner, because she spent her whole life following a high carb, low fat diet, didn't do anything based on cycle syncing. She ate healthy, pretty much had stir fries every single night, heavily relied more on fruit other than other types of snacks, ate low fat everything, low fat milk, all of that, and she still got pre-diabetes. And this is a woman who I remember waking up and always hearing her on the treadmill. She was always walking first thing in the morning, always on some kind of diet. Could never figure out why None of this was working for her when she was following all of this advice. More recently, I put her on my plan because after she got her prediabetes diagnosis, I said, something has to change. What is your doctor doing? And she said, oh, he's not really told me to do anything. He said, just come back in a few weeks' time. We'll just keep seeing where you're at with your insulin resistance. And I said, well, that's not really good enough. But she wasn't willing to go see a different doctor. So I said, do you trust me? And will you be willing to follow a plan that I give you? And she said, yep, I'll do anything. So I said, I'm going to need you to completely change how you're eating, unfortunately. Forget the Weight Watchers approach, forget the old sort of bro science. I need you to throw all of that education out the window. We're going to be focusing on these key things and these 5 levers that I always talk about in my metabolic method. Since doing that, she was in the low 90 kilo range. She just the other day told me she's now 75 kilos, which is the lowest that she has been in many, many years, and is finally fitting into some old clothes again. And while I'm very glad, it made me really annoyed that her doctor didn't put her on that type of plan, because she tried things like metformin, didn't work. It made her throw up. My dad's even tried Ozempic, didn't really work. It gave him really awful stomach pains and cramps. What actually worked was changing their diet. So some things I want you to remember from this is that fat storage in women is subcutaneous and estrogen driven. It responds to insulin management, not just calorie restriction. That's why the approach here is about insulin, not just eating less. Then 2, we have got muscle is the long game. Less of it means a slower metabolism and less carb tolerance. Believe me, you want to be eating more carbs. Build it, protect it with protein, and don't sacrifice it by chasing a lower number on the scale, please. Your cycle is a 2-week metabolic rhythm. Follicular phase, slightly more carbs, harder training is often fine here. Luteal phase, ease off, lower carbs, more fat, gentler fasting. Carb type and timing matter. And you don't need to be cutting carbs entirely. Whole food carbs earlier in the day, paired with protein and fats. These are the metabolic levers that my method is built on. And yes, they can look different for everyone. Your cycle length or your hormonal history, or whether or not you're in perimenopause, all of that changes the specifics. And I work through all of that individually with clients, because there is no one size fits all that is actually optimal for every woman. So that's really it. Your body wasn't broken all of these years. It was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. And that is responding to the hormonal signals that standard diet advice was never really designed to account for. The difference between women who finally get results and women who keep spinning is usually not effort, it's just quitting the things that are hurting your progress. And if you're interested in knowing what I finally quit to lose those 15 kilos and keep it off, you're going to love this next video up on the screen. And if you want to go deeper into the actual protocol, how it all translates to what to eat, when, how to structure your week, how to structure your plate, check out all of that in the metabolic method. It's the best next step from here. If you're still researching, I get that. And I put together a free masterclass. The links are in the description. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.